Hello, I'm Julia Stanislav, and I am a member of the Dole Institute's Student Advisory Board. Welcome to the Dole Institute of Politics, and thank you for attending today's program. The Dole Student Advisory Board is composed of KU students committed to the work of the Dole Institute. We attend regular meetings, assist in events like this, and plan an SAB-sponsored program every semester. Members of the SAB receive great opportunities to network with our special guests. If you are a student and would like to join, please contact the Dole Institute. The Dole Institute would like to hear from you. If you enjoyed today's program, please let us know by contacting us on Facebook, Twitter, or through our website email. Your attendance and feedback help shape future programming. Before we begin today, I'd like to remind you to please turn off your cell phones. After the interview, we will have some time for audience questions and answers. If you have a question, please raise your hand, and a student helper with a microphone will come to you. Please ask just one brief question. And now, please welcome Dole Institute Associate Director Barbara Ballard.
Good afternoon, and we do want to welcome you to the Dole Institute of Politics, and especially for this afternoon's program, the Dole Leadership Prize presented to the Wounded Warrior Project. Before I do the introductions, I would just like to tell you a little bit of what's going to happen this afternoon. First of all, we want you to note that there will be a community celebration following today's program. I'm sure you saw the tables and the chairs outside, and we hope you will stay for that. There will be free food, live music, and a special flyover by the commemorative Air Force and behind-the-scenes Dole Archive tours as well. The flyover will be at 6 p.m., and the celebration is from 5:30 to 6:30. And you may join the archive tour by checking in at the table inside the front doors. If you have not gone behind the scenes in the archive, I think it's something you would enjoy very much. There's an awful lot below in the archive that I think you would learn a lot from as well as enjoy. Today's program is co-sponsored by the Military Graduate Programs at KU, the KU Veterans Alumni Chapter, and the KU Collegiate Veterans. We want to give special thanks today to Curtis Marsh because he will be performing taps for us. And we want to thank the commemorative Air Force Heart of America Wing for our flyover today. We also have some military that we'd like to recognize this afternoon. And first, from Fort Leavenworth and Fort Riley. If you're here, please stand if you're able, or raise your hand. If you're from Fort Riley, you can stand. Thank you. Would also like to say, if you are a United States veteran, please stand if you're able, otherwise raise your hand. Thank you so very much. Now, some people probably do a little double duty here. If you are an active member of armed forces, please stand. And if you cannot stand, raise your hand. So we got everybody. I would also just like to tell you that please look on the back of your program for the upcoming events that we have, and you'll see them. But one I would like to just identify right now that's not here is we'll be celebrating our Veterans Day program, and we will have our tribute to veterans on November the 17th, and it's our annual gala that we have here at the Dole Institute, and I thought I'd let you know that's for your listening and dancing pleasure with the Moonlight Serenade Orchestra. At this time, I'd like you to please stand. And Curtis Marsh will play taps for us. And afterwards, could we please observe a moment of silence to recognize all of our fallen soldiers. Thank you very much. Be seated. We are very honored to have special guests with us this afternoon. Stephen Nardizzi is the co-founder and executive director and CEO of the Wounded Warrior Project. Cindy Parsons is a registered nurse and caregiver and the mother to wounded warrior Shane Parsons. Shane Parsons is a wounded warrior and junior high football coach. Brent Whitten is a wounded warrior from KU studying broadcasting. They will be interviewed this afternoon by Bill Lacey, director of the Dole Institute of Politics. And please give them all a very warm Jayhawk welcome. Bill?
Thank you all for coming today. We really appreciate it. Thank all of you for coming out and supporting this very important program. Steve, let's start with you today. Talk a little bit about how Wounded Warrior Project got started and what was the inspiration for it.
Sure, absolutely, and thank you for having us, Bill. We really appreciate it. You know, when the conflict started in 2003, a number of friends of mine and myself and some of our family members, we had experience probably for the last decade working with other veterans groups who had been around working with specific disabilities like paralyzed veterans, working with specific generations of veterans like Vietnam Veterans of America, and working with a broad cross-section of veterans of all eras, and doing amazing work and really helping them. But when these conflicts started, we looked around at the programs that were available. We looked at their programs, the programs that were available from the VA at the time, how well positioned the Department of Defense was at the time to care for the wounded, and what we realized was the model of service that was working and very helpful to veterans who were my father's generation, World War II or Vietnam era, were not going to be well positioned to take care of a newly wounded service member, a man or a woman in their 20s or 30s coming back with a severe disability and looking for a positive way to reintegrate. You know, how do I go and get a job? How do I overcome my disability and become very physically active again? How do I reintegrate with my community or come onto a college campus? Those were things that there were not a lot of programs and systems set up for. And so we really, after talking back and forth, often saying somebody really needs to create a new system, somebody really needs to do something, we eventually looked at each other and said, well, why not us? Why can't we do this? We've been helping veterans for me it was at 9 years at the time, for some of us 10 years at the time. Why can't we, so to speak, build a better mousetrap? And we had an idea, you know, that first we'd want to start not when somebody was 2 years or 3 years, you know, out of service and already struggling with the disability, but we wanted to get in much earlier. So really start when somebody's in active duty, when they hit a hospital bedside as early as possible, letting them know that there's someone here to support them, letting them know that there would be help as they go through their rehabilitation. You know, so starting that whole process of not thinking about what your disability might prevent you from doing, but thinking about what you could achieve, but perhaps just achieve differently in life, what we'd call learning to live with your new normal. You know, we also knew that if we were really going to help warriors reintegrate, that we would need their assistance. You know, one of the great things that if you look around all of the veterans groups out there and all the terrific ones, one of the great things about them is that there is a common bond. You know, when you leave the military, whether you leave the military with a disability or without, you take off your uniform and you leave some of that shared sense of camaraderie and public service, and you want to be around like-minded individuals. You want to be around, particularly when you've been in combat, you want to be around other combat veterans and other people who have shared that experience with you. So we knew we wanted warriors engaged in helping each other through their rehabilitation, and it's actually a concept that we wanted so ingrained in all of our programs that we embodied it in our logo. So when you look at our logo, it's one warrior carrying another warrior off the field of battle. And that's something that we really wanted to encapsulate in our programs, and immediately when we walked into a hospital bedside, have a warrior realize they get me, they understand me. And now the goal isn't just get you off the battlefield, but the goal is to get you back into your community and back to your family and back reintegrated and successful again. And we knew if we were going to do that, one of the models that we certainly wanted to change in veteran service was the notion that veterans organizations, only veterans can be a part of in terms of supporting. Historically, and this has been great, and we still have a lot of support from Vietnam-era veterans, from World War II veterans, and we've learned a lot of lessons from the great work that they've all done over the years. But when you look now at the population who is serving active duty military, it is such a small percentage of the overall population. It's not like when my father came home and you look to your right and your left and all of your neighbors had served or been touched by the war, had been involved in food rationing, had been involved in making sacrifices for the conflicts, and that went on through Vietnam, through the Korean War. When you look at our nation now, there is a large disconnect between those of us who benefit from the defense we get from the very small percent who raise their hand and voluntarily say, I'm going to serve my country, and those of us who reap the reward of that. And so we wanted to make sure that as warriors were coming home, that they were able to come home to communities who understood them, to communities that were engaged with them, to communities that would support them in their recovery and really understand the sacrifices they had made, the challenges they had gone through, but that they were still coming back, maybe different than they left, but they were still the same sons and daughters. They were still the same neighbors and friends and co-workers that they were. So we really wanted, in all of our efforts to message and engage the public in what we were trying to do, make sure that we were inclusive in that fashion.
Mm-hmm. Talk about some of your specific programs. I know that I mentioned to you before the program this afternoon that I had first heard of Wounded Warrior Project when I read a story about bicycle rides that you put on for wounded warriors. Talk a little bit about some of the specific programs that you have.
Sure. We started when we first got founded with a very simple program. We knew we didn't want to come into a hospital bedside and pretend to a warrior that we knew everything that they would need in this generation from day one to be successful. We needed to learn from them. And all of the programs we've designed over time have really come from learning from warriors and their family, listening to them, finding out where there were gaps, and developing programs to meet their needs. So our very first program was a backpack. It was a very simple idea to enter a hospital bedside. We knew that when warriors were coming back to Walter Reed, to Brooke Army Medical Center, that oftentimes all they had was a hospital gown. And that's not a very confidence-building way for a young warrior to wake up and address their day. And so we wanted to give them a calling card with a little bit of comfort, a T-shirt, some loose-fitting clothes that you could get over a prosthetic or over a burn, some calling cards, some games that they could play. But most importantly, it was an entry with a promise, so that walking those hospital bedsides and giving out that backpack, you would say to the warrior, we're here for you, the public's here for you. We didn't forget about you now that you're home, and we're going to stick with you over the long term. And by engaging that dialogue early on, we were able to develop over 18 programs right now that serve the wounded, and they really fall into 4 categories that we've learned are necessary if warriors are really going to transition successfully. So one of them is keeping them engaged. The worst thing that you can have is warriors who become isolated from their community, from their families, from other warriors, or from us. And so we spend a lot of time conducting outreach to find warriors, to get them out of their homes, to get them out to events, to get them out in their communities, and then most importantly, to find out what their individual needs are and plug them back in our other programs. We work very hard with physical rehabilitation programs. We look at ways to supplement the great medical care that warriors get from the Department of Defense, from the Department of Veterans Affairs. So, the wonders of modern medicine are you have warriors who are living and coming home from the battlefield with wounds that in previous generations they would not have. Many triple amputees, you still have some high levels of paralysis. Certainly traumatic brain injury and severe traumatic brain injuries are ever prevalent. And working with those warriors to find ways to get them physically active again and build their confidence. So to get beyond the notion of we're going to treat and maintain your disability, but get these young men and women who you can imagine join the military and were physically active and engaged and physically fit, and getting them to a point where they feel they can do that again, whether it be, as you said, cycling, which is a great program that I love, our Soul Ride program. It's something that you can get anyone with any disability, whether you're blind, whether you're an amputee, severe burns. You can get them out on a bicycle very early in their rehabilitation, get them out in the community, get them out doing something physically active and feeling normal again, and getting them thinking, most importantly, about, wow, I can do this. And so if I can cycle, then maybe I can start skiing again, which is another great activity that we get warriors out doing. Or I can start boating or fishing or any one of the activities I loved and just do it differently. And once you start thinking that way, it motivates you to get out of that hospital bed, to engage in your rehabilitation more, and to start thinking about what else you can do. Well, maybe, yes, I can go to work again. Maybe, yes, I can go back to school. Maybe, yes, I can have a family and live the life that I wanted to live before my injury. So supporting those physical activities is vitally important. And as you can imagine, if you're not physically fit, it impacts every other area of your life, your work, your mental health. Certainly looking at a young group of warriors who are coming out in their 20s and 30s, maybe a career in the military was what they wanted. Maybe they already had jobs and they were in the National Guard and the Reserve, and because of their disability, they can't go back to that same job. Well, then looking at ways that we can help educate them and retrain them. And so we have a host of programs that are really geared towards training warriors in anything from technology. So we have a very vibrant program, about 1,000 warriors a year we take through, teaching them everything from how to be help desk technicians to how to be network systems engineers to how to be cybersecurity specialists, and great industry careers there. We have a program that really helps warriors do everything from end-to-end placement in a job, which is difficult for any veteran transitioning from military service. You've got these great leadership skills. You've managed massive budgets. You're a great team player. You're a great leader. You're able to work long hours under high stress, but you take all of those great skills in a military MOS and try and translate that into a language that a civilian employer would understand who hasn't served in the military, and that can be very difficult. So we work with warriors on that, on understanding interview skills, and most importantly, educating employers about the benefits of hiring a warrior, particularly a wounded warrior, and understanding the benefit to them. This is not a job that's a handout. These warriors, they want to contribute again, they can contribute again, but you need to understand how you might need to accommodate some of their disabilities when you employ them. So a big focus on employment and education. And then, of course, mental health. And I'm sure everyone's seen the numbers. I think the estimates right now are somewhere around 400 or 500,000 warriors are coming home right now suffering from combat stress, post-traumatic stress disorder, traumatic brain injuries that affect your emotional state, your cognitive ability in some cases, and they are really the invisible wounds of war. These are not easily diagnosed. There's still a lot of stigma around them, so there's still a hesitancy, I think, in the public in general to admit that you might have a mental health or behavioral health issue, certainly in the military, where it is, it is viewed you are tough and you are rugged and you get the job done. It is not easy to admit that you might have an emotional struggle. It's not even easy for warriors, and we do a lot of outreach on this, for them to admit that they might be a wounded warrior. So if you've got a physical injury, if you're an amputee, it's very easy to identify with our logo and seek assistance. And if you're a warrior who sees that warrior as an amputee and maybe you have an invisible wound, it's a little harder, and it takes a lot of education and effort to help those warriors realize that it's a real injury. Just because you can't see it does not mean it's not real. It doesn't mean it doesn't cause you and your family pain, but it is treatable, and it is something that you can heal from. So we do a lot of education in that area. We have a lot of preclinical programs that supplement much of what the Department of Veterans Affairs and Department of Defense does. We run some of those programs in connection with them. Many of them help teach life skills, help them navigate the healthcare system and do case management. We have a program called Project Odyssey that's more of an outward bound technique, as you can imagine, many of our approach to dealing with mental health issues. As you can imagine, most of our warriors are physically fit, and they're people who like to get things done. They want to see it, feel it, touch it. They're experiential learners, we would call them, and so we really took an experiential learning model and applied it to mental health. We teach cognitive behavioral therapy techniques to warriors in a setting that tests their physical strength and skill. So they might do rope courses or some other physical activity, and while they're doing that, get under a high degree of stress and apply tools and techniques that they learn in group settings and group counseling settings the night before and apply that in a real-world situation with support of other warriors. So a very big focus on mental health, a very big focus on what more we could do for families with traumatic brain injuries and for their caregivers. You know, there are many warriors, there's several thousand families right now, mostly those coping with traumatic brain injury and or a comorbid physical injury, who are going to need lifelong care, who are going to need lifelong help from their families, from their spouses, or from their parents. And we've seen over time and time again, these families giving up jobs to stay home and be a 24-hour caregiver. And what we've spent a lot of time doing with those families is finding ways to support them, to give them respite. We bring them out in groups. We teach them coping skills. We get them connected with each other. We do stress management techniques that they can take home with them. We even get creative and work with groups like the Writers Guild so that they can interact and engage in a cathartic exercise of writing about what's going on with them. And most importantly, keeping them, again, connected with each other so that they know there's a system of support. And probably, and I'll let maybe Shane and Cindy talk a little bit more about our independence program, but we really started thinking about how we redefine what success means and work on success for some warriors who have a severe traumatic brain injury. You know, it's a little easier for us to envision for an amputee with the modern state of medicine what their life might lead. You know, there's great prosthetic devices, there's a great treatment protocol, and the vision is the same vision of success for everyone. It's I'm going to get married, I'm going to have kids, I'm going back to school. I might take a different path to get there, but I'm going to get there. And that might not be true for every family living with and coping with severe traumatic brain injury, but you can redefine success. And there are a lot of stories about warriors that I could share with you. I'm not going to do it now because it would take some time, but if anyone wants to talk to me later who had been given up on, well, then they'll just sit at home. Well, they'll play Nintendo and they'll sit with their families and they'll be forgotten, and that is not an end for a warrior who served their country and got injured in our defense. And so we've been working very hard, working with groups that do cognitive behavioral rehabilitation and life skills coaching on finding a new way to find success for those warriors. And it's very encouraging because we're seeing warriors who are going back to work, who are volunteering, who are getting out of the house, and their families are proud and engaged with them again. And that's a life-changing thing, and it's exciting to see, and there's more to follow. You know, the last thing I'd say in our programs is I can't sit in the Dole Institute and not talk about policy being important to us, and as much good as we've been able to do over time at the project, and as much as we know our programs help, the great thing is we take all of the great knowledge we learn from working with warriors, and we try and apply them in the field of policy. So we try and say, what is it that we're doing now that we can't possibly scale to the size that the government might want to pick up. And we've done that several times. We've introduced 2 major pieces of legislation. One, traumatic servicemen's group life insurance. It's a program that pays out to severely injured warriors $25,000 to $100,000 in the first several weeks after their injury. And we developed that program working with some warriors right at their hospital bedside, understanding the need and the financial strain on their families when they became newly injured, and to date that program's paid out over $700 million in benefits that we would never have been able to afford to do. And so it's great when you can leverage the good work you're doing programmatically and take it to a much larger scale.
Okay, that's very good. Shane, let's get you to talk a little bit about why you decided to volunteer, sir.
How old was I at that time? 18. I was 18, yeah. Junior in high school when 9/11 hit, and I didn't know what I wanted to do at that time as a young kid. Played football in high school, wrestled. You know, I was okay with grades. It wasn't, you know, all A's and B's. You know, and sometimes I get an A or I succeeded as much as I could as an only child. After 9/11 hit, it kind of veered me to a different area of what else I wanted to succeed in life. After 9/11 hit, I was very frustrated. I was very angry, frustrated, not knowing what was going on. Wanted to know why and what and where. So I decided to join at the age of 19 still as the only child. My mother had to sign for me because I was still underage. That's the reason why I joined.
And describe some of your experiences before you went overseas. What was basic training like?
I was always hyper. I think that kind of helped a lot. As a kid, I was diagnosed with ADD, ADHD, and was a hyper kid, and never sat still. Decided to, I wanted to, become a sniper in the Army, and so I had to go to Fort Benning, Georgia, during the summer. And as if anybody knows, Sand Hill during the summer, it's not the greatest. It's very, very hot. Basic training, you're doing pretty much doing everything, exercising in the sand, you run in the sand, sleep in the sand, everything. Basic training was a little tough in the beginning. Didn't know where I would stand, but all I knew is what I wanted to do, and I didn't care what it took, and and didn't care if it was painful or not. I endured, whatever I had to do to succeed in my career in basic training, to be the top, be as high as I can get, and as qualified as marksmanship, qualified one of the top in the class. After that, it seemed like all that kind of went away. It was a little easy, and then basic training, and then jump school, and everything, and a little bit more yelling in the face, and was already used to that. And was raised by a Hispanic family only, especially my grandmother and my mother and all the females. And I was second oldest in the family, and the boys. There's 8 of us. Or wait, there's 8 boys and 2 girls. So yeah, I was already used to getting yelled at, and I was already used to mopping floors and cleaning already, and was already knew what to do about that. Cleaning the toilets and all that was like, all right, this is what you want me to do, that's fine. And then until one day I mopped the floor so good that the drill sergeant come in and slipped and fell. And yeah, I used too much wax. But as learning, you learn to work with each other as a team, and as a brotherhood. Some people, some guys you hated, some guys you loved. I had a really good friend that went to basic with me. He was a reservist. My buddy R.J. Pucci, he lives in Schaumburg, Illinois, in Chicago, and we connected pretty well. And it was tough at times, but we pushed each other pretty much. He was a runner, distance runner. I never ran track. I was just regular wrestled and played football. He'd push me during the running, and I'd help him out during combatives, hand-to-hand combat with the wrestling and stuff that were trained through the Gracies and everything. So it was he'd help me and I helped him, and there's many times we'd be exhausted and we'd take a little break. The only area we would get breaks was in the latrine in the bathrooms and stuff. You'd be able to take watch. We'd rest, and that's the only time we would be able to get rest, because we pushed each other to the limit and pushed ourselves a lot more than most of the guys that did. A lot of the guys complained a lot. We just kept telling each other, we got this. It's nothing. So it's pretty much a brotherhood of wanting to help each other out. That's what got me through. Besides, I wanted to prove my family and some, wrong, and showing them as a kid that, grew up without a father. By the way, my father passed away when I was 6 months old of a brain tumor. So I never had the only closest father figure I had was, an uncle. And yeah, he was, there, and then he had to go to college in Ohio State. Went to Columbus for college and moved there, and all I had was myself and then my cousins. But pretty much I had to learn the hard way, and actually that's always how I was always learned, was the hard way. And I'd rather take the hard way than the easy way, because the easy way gets you just as much in trouble as you do as the hard way. So I did a lot of push-ups in basic.
Tell us, Shane, when you were deployed, what was your role?
I was one of the, I don't know, I was stationed out of Fort Hood, 4th ID, and it was odd. I was the only sniper in the unit that we had, so as a private, I had to train other guys that would come back that didn't go through sniper school. I had to train a lot of guys that they said they knew how to shoot, like farm boys knew how to shoot and stuff like that. I've been shooting for years, know how, deer and everything. I've never hunted in my life. It seemed like they thought they knew what they were doing, but this is distance. You're thinking about altitude, distance, wind, everything comes in count. So in the beginning, we had to go to Kuwait. Sitting there, Kuwait, it was real hot. I remember the first time we stepped off the bus, and it was horrible. It was just hot, just real dry. And then we sat there and had to wait until everything was getting situated, and then we rolled out into Baghdad, and we were stationed in for a while. Camp Rustamaya in Baghdad for a while, and then after we got our orders, we were sent to stay in the UN compound in Baghdad, where we worked with special operations and worked with a lot of other guys. So,
tell us about the day that you were injured.
I always took night missions. They had everybody go out on doing night missions. I was always used to staying up staying up for hours on end. I never slept that much anyway, just enough, a couple hours, some food, get yourself some exercise, cleaning, making sure the guys' weapons and everything was cleaned and ready to go. I volunteered to clean everybody's rifles, shotguns, even some of the sergeants, M4s, and sat and was cleaning everything. And my bed was right here, my bathroom was right here, and just a row of just weapons, and from the 240s to 50 caliber. I mean, just everything. I sat there and cleaned every bit of it. That was my time off. I was very interested, and it was something that I enjoyed. Did not mind cleaning every bit of it, because a lot of guys were complaining and just didn't want to do their job. So I was like, I'll do it. It's fine. I remember got a call, had a mission. You drive in and go outside the wire, and as an infantryman, kicking down doors and everything I love to do, and getting my friends back no matter what. I'd pull security. I'd be always the first one in, last one out. It'd be a couple times we'd kick the doors, and my foot would go through the door sometimes, and that was kind of scary. But we had each other's back, and no matter what, it's okay. So we decided to just tackle the door sometimes, and just as a football, you lower that shoulder and you just drive through. So kind of helped. We just got off of a pretty much 2 days of a mission. We were trying to find part of Al Qaeda were setting up EFPs and IEDs, and they were using dead animals from their own dogs to their own cattle, pretty much anything that they were using. And we got a call into got intel knowing that where one of the caches where the weapons were at, and it was a big one. and we got there, and pretty much 200 to 300 pounds of explosives that we found, 30 to 40 AKs, gold AKs, regular AKs, caches of makeshift of weaponry that they mixed in with, from walkie-talkies to doorbell garages to everything. We detonate from distances to cell phones and everything. Right after that, we got another call, so we went out and checked it out, and it was another area we found that was detonated earlier. And we went out with EOD to do that and check that area out. And on our way back to get chow, I remember that day we had king crab legs that day. They were cold, but it was king crab legs. Instead of making your own food, going to the market and grabbing your own food sometimes instead of eating MREs. MREs I didn't mind. So on our way back to get chow, we were hit pretty hard. I was lead Humvee. I never drove. I was always gunning, or I was just in the back, calling out different areas where to go, turn left, turn right, down the street, route this, route Brewers, route this, and just all this. And I decided to switch spots to let my gunner. I had just turned 21. My birthday was August the 3rd, and the month ended up being September. And my gunner, he was 19 years old, Chris Melendez, a 6-foot, stout guy, could hold the 50 cal like it was a pistol. It was just a stout kid, and I trusted a lot. And so me and him would go out. I asked my buddy, I'm like, hey, after we get done, you trying to go on this mission? And they were like, yeah, so that's cool. So we got back, and they said, no, it's cool, don't worry about it, we got somebody else to do it for us. So we got back and to the base and put my weapon down and everything, vest and everything. I slept in my pants and just socks and everything, or with no socks, just pants, and just your shirt that you got that goes over your vest, and your shirt and everything goes over your vest. Laid everything down, collapsed everything down, got everything cleaned up, went out and heard some arguing. I always let my door cracked open so I could hear arguing, and then our CQ was just a couple down the hall, and I could hear arguing, and it was one of my good friends, Kenneth Smith, Georgia boy, Bacon, went to training with us, and he just found out that his wife was pregnant and was having a child, and I was single, didn't have a girlfriend, I wasn't married, didn't have any children. I asked him, I come up to him and asked what's going on. Kind of got into it with one of our NCOs, but at that time I spent a lot of hours out in the field than he did, and kind of stood up to it at the time, and ended up being a specialist, and they got rank, and I was like, you know what, this is cool. I told my buddy Kenny, it was Bacon, is what they called him. I told him, I was like, you know what, I got this. I wake my buddy Chris up, and he was dead to the world. He was passed out. So I had to knock on his door, got him, rolled him out of bed, and was like, hey, let's, one of our good friends was like, hey, let's just do this, because I always picked on him a lot. And I was like, come on, let's just go do this real quick. And we suited up, and so we were on our way. On our way, we'd get calls in, so check it out. People within the community, the Shiites, and they bomb their own people, and they so we go over there and check it out, and have to pull security while they clean up. The other Afghan army would have to clean up the mess, and pull security while they do that, and then we go to our local areas that we check out that would for hostiles that would have IEDs or EFPs or anything, weaponry or caches or anything. So we did our regular thing. By the time it was around lunchtime, we went out around 9 or 10 o'clock in the morning. And by the time it was lunchtime, and by the time it was like, hey, let's go get some lunch, gear up, get some gas, and go back out. And we never took the same route, and they always yelled at me because I never stopped, and I'd, pedal the metal. I was pretty much like NASCAR. I was like, yeah, let's go. So, as we were going up to it, I saw something that, out of the ordinary, didn't look out of the ordinary. They would use garbage bags and everything to cover it up, or they would cement cover it up to make it look like, it was a broken piece off the side of the road, and to makeshift and make it look like it was just brand new. But I decided to back up, turned around, went around and was checking it out, and went down a different route, and I think they were waiting for us. They had a pretty keen eye as a sniper. My distance for eyesight was very good. I could tell something was out of the ordinary. So we took a different route and on our way to get chow. That's when we were hit. I didn't know what was going on. It was just I heard a pop and cloud of smoke, and I look over and my gunner was moaning and groaning, and if anybody has a weak stomach, I'm sorry. I seen him look over at Chris. I didn't care about myself. I looked over at Chris, and he was sitting gunning, and I seen him pick up his left leg and set it next to him, and that's when I knew it was pretty bad, and that's when the burning and everything and the sensation hit. And after the smoke cleared from the detonation, we were ambushed, and it didn't hit me right away until I opened up the Humvee door, and the doors are up armored 50, 60 pounds, and the door felt completely off. And I'm leaning out, putting suppressive fire down, and we had guys were coming up and supporting. Bradley's come rolling up, and they scattered, and I just cut open my pants to try to start a tourniquet because I couldn't tell where the bleeding was. And my legs looked like they were in a meat grinder, so right away I knew it was pretty bad, so I tried to stay calm, and the one leg was pretty much gone. And I was yelling, and I don't know if I threw my leg at somebody or something, but I was very upset, and ended up dying right there on site, dying in the Black Hawk, and died in the Baghdad crash. I ended up totally cardiac arrest 3 times. Lost the ability to read and write. I'm at kindergarten level now. September of '06 was my due date. It was when I was injured, and I was a month shy out of a year. Only had 1 more month, and I would have been done. It would have been sent back to wherever. So that's what happened. It's my injury.
Okay. Cindy, how were you informed about Shane's injury, and as a nurse, what was your reaction?
I had just pulled a 12-hour shift in a local community hospital, ERs, I'm an ER nurse, and I remember it was a Saturday morning, and I heard the phone ring, and sometimes Shane would call on Saturday morning, so I hurried up thinking, okay, that's my baby, he's calling, I can't wait to hear from him, because I hadn't heard from him for quite a while. But when I picked the phone up, there was a stranger on the other line, and he asked if I was Mrs. Parsons and if I had a son, Shane, and I said, yes, I do. And he proceeded to tell me that Shane was critically injured in an incident and that I was supposed to stand by the phone. And 2 calls later, I stood by that phone, and it was felt like a dream. It didn't feel real. And that second call, he told me that Shane had lost one of his legs in the injury, and to still stand by the phone. And then the third call, they told me that they had to amputate his other leg and to save his life. And I dropped to my knees and couldn't understand why it couldn't tell me any more information. They were very vague, very short answers, and of course this person was just a go-between. He didn't know anything more than what he was told. So I just remember dropping to my knees thinking, how will we ever survive? How will Shane survive this? And I knew in medical terms that was pretty difficult, because when you have severe amputations that are in an explosion like that, the blood loss is just horrific. And so I realized That's when the prayers began, and my instinct kicked in as a mom. First off, I needed to be with my son. And they did expedite passports. I was on my way to Landstuhl, Germany, and I just remember that flight seemed like forever. Thinking in my mind, I'm screaming, Shane, you fight, because I know you can do this. Don't you give up. And I just kept repeating that in my mind. So when we did arrive in Landstuhl, Germany, which they contained him, stabilized him in Baghdad cache, brought him to Landstuhl. He had already been there for 2 days prior to me arriving. Of course, they debrief you. The doctors want you to know what's happening. And I'm thinking, okay, I do this every day. I just want to go get in his room. And when I walked in the room, he was unrecognizable. He was swollen beyond recognition. He had every type of equipment to maintain life. He was on a ventilator to breathe, cardiac monitors, PICC line for IVs going everywhere. But I think the hardest part for me was seeing a tube protruding out of his brain. And I knew at that point, this is really bad. That's what they call a ventriculostomy. And they actually drill that tube into the brain, and they put a probe in to measure the intracranial pressure, because what's happened is when he passed away multiple times, the brain was swollen because of the traumatic event. And with that blood loss, he actually had parts of his brain completely die because there was no blood or oxygen going to the brain. So he has frontal and temporal lobe damage. Parts of the brain died. And I just remember that I had to touch him, and he was very cold, not a flicker of his eyelashes, didn't move his fingers, You just look for those signs. As a nurse, And I just bent down and whispered in his ear. I said, Shane, you fight, because I know you can do this. You're strong. Mom is here, and I love you. And I remember kissing him, but again, no reaction.
Both of you talk a little bit about the challenges that you faced when Shane came back and how Wounded Warrior Project assisted you.
Our first initial exposure to Wounded Warrior Project was when Shane was transferred from Landstuhl to Walter Reed, and that was in December of '06. And I remember he was in ICU for many weeks, and finally they got him to the neuro ward. And I remember 2 gentlemen came to the room, and Shane was pretty bad. He still was in a comatose state. They put him in a barbiturate coma, so they were kind of weaning him slowly off of the barbiturates, and he really didn't know what was going on. And I remember these 2 gentlemen came to the room and brought a backpack, and they introduced themselves, and there was just a warm feeling that I knew somebody really cared. And in the backpack, as Steve said, had clothing and toiletries and a pack of cards, and just that feeling that somebody really cared. That was our first exposure. We had never heard of them before, but they just wanted us to know that there was somebody there, and if we needed anything, they gave us a card, let them know. And that was so rewarding for us to know that we had somebody there for Shane. And of course, what really impressed me, that they did talk to Shane, even though he wasn't able to verbalize, but they still talked to him as if, that we're here for you, Shane, and we'll do anything we can. I would like to go further with that, because as a few years went by and he was in rehab, he was transferred to Minneapolis, Minnesota for traumatic brain injury rehab after 15 surgeries to his limbs. By the way, they had to make sure that the infection was completely eradicated. After going through several months for the traumatic brain injury, we ended up at Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, Texas, and there he remained for 3 years. So I had never left his side. I'd given up everything. Isn't that what moms do? You just do that because that's what we do. We won't leave our child unattended and when they need us the most. And I remember I received a phone call, and I know that phone call changed my life as well as Shane's, because he was still struggling a lot of issues with the brain injury and post-traumatic stress disorder, depression. That phone call, they asked me, it was Wounded Warrior Project, they wanted to know if I would be interested in going to Washington, D.C. and be a part of a caregiver group to lobby for change because we needed change so desperately. Giving up your income, our home, a job, insurance. And I said, tell me more. So they proceeded to explain that they wanted to get a group of us together, brainstorm, tell our stories, meet other caregivers, and basically knock on congressmen's, senators' doors, tell them our story, and to make change because we need change desperately. And realizing that I could help another mother, absolutely. So I called my mom. She flew her from Ohio. She stayed with Shane. That was the first time I left his side in over 3 years. And when I arrived in D.C., I couldn't believe that there were people like me, and the stories that we told each other, I realized my son is doing very well compared to the stories I heard. It was very difficult to hear. For example, one lady, she was ready to retire. She couldn't retire because her son could do nothing for himself, but maybe blink one for yes and blink two for no. And that was very difficult for me. So we cried, tell our stories. I remember meeting Steve for the first time. It was amazing when they put us in those positions where we can be an advocate and be a voice for those who can't speak for themselves and to make change. And I'm so proud to say that in 2010, I believe, May 5th, President Obama signed the bill into act, and now we receive monthly stipends, training, and health care, which that was the most important part for me, was the health care. To go a little bit further with that, Shane started to be involved as an alumni, where he was asked to go on several of the programs, like what Steve mentioned. I think one of the first programs he went skiing in Breckenridge. We both went downhill skiing, which he loved skiing. That was part of his passion. I don't ski. It's pretty sad. Not to mention then he was involved in a lot of the different programs. But one that sticks out the most is the soldier ride. We got to go on a soldier ride. Secondary rehab. They offered Shane to go to the amputee conference, which the amputee conference is held every year for all amputees around the world. And Shane, yes, he was around other soldiers who had multiple amputations, burns, but he'd never really been around all ages with all variations of amputees. And that really opened his eyes. He said, I really fit in here, don't I, Mom? And he was like a social butterfly. I didn't see him. He was from 5-year-olds to 80-year-olds that had every kind of amputation you can imagine. And he learned a lot. We learned a lot from that, as well as he had an evaluation with hanger prosthetics. Hanger prosthetics, they are absolutely amazing. The actual rehab that they do, where they measure and make sure that they do an evaluation to see if they're eligible, what type of prosthetic, and Shane was evaluated. It was a very difficult thing because he has gone through therapy, but the prosthetic training just didn't work for him. He gets into so much pain from his back area and the legs, and so that was very difficult. But to have the opportunity to have that outside the military meant the world. Most importantly, and there's other programs that he's sent to Alaska, deep sea fishing. I'll let him tell you about that, because he came back with a smile that I've never seen that smile before. He had so much fun with other soldiers. But in the last 8 months, Shane has been involved with a program called Independence Program. It started out as a pilot program, and now it's blossoming. This program has literally changed Shane's life as well as my own. What they did is they do an evaluation, and what it is to integrate them back into the community. Otherwise, when he came home after his rehab for many years, he got in a rut of sitting in the room playing video games and really didn't know what he wanted to do with the rest of his life. He asked me, what am I going to do? I have no idea what to do. We tried several things, but it just wasn't his fit. And with this evaluation, they have a peer mentor or a job coach come in. you utilize what's in the community, first of all, what that evaluation, because they want to find out what are their barriers, what are the strengths, what are the weaknesses. Most importantly, what is his goal? What is his interest? What would he like to do? And he realized he wanted to get back into football and he wanted to coach young kids because that was a passion he always had. And now you have to understand with those barriers, he's unable to read and write. How are you going to read the plays? How are you going to teach the child or those children to read those plays when you have difficulties reading? Well, we found out with Goodwill Industries, there is a job coaches out there that they put the word out. They went through colleges, local colleges, and Shane found a fantastic young man named C.J. Potter who works out of Tiffin University. He is actually a track coach who took on the feat that he would be Shane's job coach. And with that, after 8 months, in the state of Ohio, you have to pass CPR certification in order to coach with children. You have to pass a modular, all on the computer that you have to read, of course, and answer, in order to coach. And after 8 months, CJ worked every single day for hours with Shane. He passed CPR, he passed the modular, and he ended up being with the St. Wendland Junior High 7th and 8th grade coach for defensive this year. And we were proud that he had 4 wins, 3 losses. Amazing.
That's awesome.
And it's, but most importantly, what the whole program is independent program, because the utmost importance for our young men and women that are wounded warriors, they want their independence back. They don't want that handout. They don't want to sit in the room every single day. They want to be accepted. And as Shane in our community, there's not any young men that are bilateral amputees with traumatic brain injuries. So people look at them differently, even though they know the story. So the independence is the utmost important. But the self-confidence that he has gotten out of this program in the last 8-9 months is tenfold, because I've never seen him so happy. And now he's working with another job coach where he is, I think your next goal is, you want to do wrestling? As a wrestling coach.
That's really awesome. And Shane, I'm going to get back to you in a few minutes and ask you to talk a little bit about that, but I want to move to Brent. And Brent, you're from Topeka.
That's right.
And you're a student here at
Correct.
KU now.
That's right.
What moved you to volunteer?
With the Wounded Warrior Project?
No, with the Army.
With the Army. Well, I think that it was a mixture of 2 things. First of all, I've always had a love of history, military history, and just having the honor to grow up in America, you need to give something back. A lot of my generation was like, oh, I'll just go to college and, see what happens. That wasn't enough for me. I have to earn my freedom in this country. So that's one of the reasons. The second reason that really cemented it was September 11th. I remember sitting in my high school class at Washington Rule in sophomore year, watching it all unfold. And that day was just pretty much, that was it. I was going to go do something about it. So that's one of the reasons I joined.
Mm-hmm. Well, how was your basic training and early days of deployment?
Well, I think it was very similar because we were actually both at Fort Benning probably about the same time, summer of '04. Wow. So probably pretty darn similar. A lot of rough days and rough nights, but you do what you got to do.
Tell us about the day that you were injured. What kind of mission were you on, and what were you up to?
Sure. Well, I was actually on a brand new assignment. I was transferred on my old platoon and put into pretty much a new division. And I was gunning on my commander's Humvee, and my commander was a month-old company commander too, brand new company commander. And our mission at the time was to go find potholes. So that's what we were doing. And then I remember driving in the Humvee while I was in the gunning, and we had to kind of hunch down because there were snipers. So we couldn't stand up and analyze our surroundings or anything, and really couldn't even see inside the Humvee. It's kind of in purgatory there in the middle of the cupola. I remember just driving down the road. The next thing I know, I kind of feel like I was waking up from something, like kind of waking up from a nap. But then I realized, everything, like my ears were ringing, my skin was really hot, my uniform was really hot, and I couldn't see. So at that point, I kind of realized that this isn't a dream. This is actually, I'm under attack. I didn't know how bad at the time. once I figured out what was going on, I looked down at the cupola. My driver was okay. I kind of confirmed what was going on, and I could not hear from my commander, my captain in my Humvee. I tried to move my legs to get out because the Humvee was on fire, and I could hear rounds start to cook off. But I couldn't move my legs, so I kind of had to push myself out of the cupola using my arms and kind of roll on the hood, then roll on the ground. Kind of looked over at the Humvee, saw everything was on fire, tried to get up, still couldn't get up, and there was no one around me at the time. So I just kind of rolled until I hit a curb. I couldn't roll over the curb. I kind of stood there, and then eventually probably 30, it seemed like forever, but it was probably only 30 seconds to a minute. The rest of my squad came up and provided first aid and figured out what was going on, and I was medevaced out to the Baghdad cache, and that was the end of the first day.
Okay. And how injured were you? How were you injured?
Well, once I got to Germany, well, actually in Baghdad, they figured out that my hip was broken in a couple places, a couple fractures, and I had some second and third degree burns on my arms, and my face was completely, it looked burnt off. I couldn't really see myself for a while, but I was trying to picture it. I'm like, well, that's not very good looking, but so those were my main injuries. What later came was head injuries. I didn't realize at the time I had a concussion. I kind of eventually figured it out, but the head injury is the more long-term injury. By the time that was secondary at the time, but also there.
Okay. And what challenges did you face when you were coming back?
Well, definitely when I was coming back, just first of all, just the mental thing of you're so set in your mind that you're going to be deployed for a year. And one mission, you're with your friends, and you go out on a mission, see in a little bit, and then you realize you're not coming back to your friends. So at first I was like, I really should go back there, and it took me a while to realize that I couldn't go back there. I wasn't, I was still mentally there, but I wasn't an asset anymore. I couldn't walk. So the first thing you have to realize is that it's just so weird waking up and not being with your buddies anymore. So you have to realize you're going back home, and that's probably the main thing, is just realizing you're going back home unexpectedly, not unplanned.
Yeah. And you have a family, and they were, what did Rachel think? How did she find out about your injuries?
Luckily, I was still awake, so I was able to call her a couple hours afterwards. I assume a couple hours. Once again, I'm not sure, but it seemed like a couple hours. I called her and told her, hey, I'm coming home a little early, and she kind of got teary, so I said, I'll call you back in a little bit. I'm okay, I'm not dead. So called her back a couple hours later, and she was fine. I assume she notified our chain of command, so everything was good.
Okay. Now, what are your plans? You're studying, is it journalism here at KU?
That's right. I got out of the Army. I was discharged. They pretty much told me I could reclass with my injuries. I was pretty much stuck to staff duty, which is just sitting behind a desk and filling out PowerPoints. But I like my job as an infantryman, and if I could do that, I really did want to stay in. So they went ahead and med-boarded me, and I worked at local grocery stores for security for a year, and then I used a new GI Bill of fall of '09 and started school here.
Okay. And what do you hope to do when you graduate? What are your plans?
Well, I'd certainly like to get a job somewhere, but that's my plan.
Okay. Okay, that's great. You're going to a great school to do that.
That's right.
So good J school too. Shane, spend a couple minutes. Tell us about your coaching.
Oh, there was to reset. When I was injured, I forgot to mention that I remember. I don't remember, but I was told when I was in the Black Hawk. I don't know if I accidentally or I did, but I ended up knocking out the crew chief in the Black Hawk, and I knocked out my medic too. So, but it's fight or flight. I don't know if it was, but it's the coaching it was a challenge. It was a huge challenge with the reading disability. Like to show you, to pick up an actual pamphlet that you guys are checking out right now. If I were to open up the first page, it would take me about a week to finish the whole thing. But no, it was something I wanted to do. I've never quit anything in my life, anything I wanted to do, I'd find a way to do it, or I'd find a way around it to get it done. And I always head first, always lowered my shoulder and pushed myself through it even though I didn't want to do it. Getting up early in the mornings, I love my sleep. I love my video games. I love going out and hanging out with my friends and just, having a good time when you come back home to the States and haven't seen your friends in years. And it was just something I wanted to do, and I just didn't want to sit home and just, some of the guys that I know just sit there and just get fat and play games and just sit there and use their benefits to other uses. Guys that just sit there and just pop pills all day and just, I didn't want to be that way. I wanted to get out and help my community out like they helped me. When I got home, I was given the key to the city from my hometown from my mayor. So I had to do something about that. They retired my football, my number, my jersey number. They did a lot for me. Everything that I could ask for, and even more. So I had to do something for my hometown, for my family. So I decided to, something that I was really familiar with, around. Before I joined the military, I used to be a local dishwasher at a cafe. I used to babysit at the YMCA. I just liked working with kids. I'm a people person. I don't like to see people mad or sad. I like to see people happy. So what not only did it drive me to become a football coach is my godson was a little guy, was born, and he was so little he was able to fit in a shoebox. He was a preemie, he was born with rickets. I mean, he was just a little thing. And then now you see him and he's got a mouth on him and he's like, it's bad. And I said, hey, I'm familiar with some of the kids. They know who I am, and my little local celebrity in my hometown, and it's great. I still try and give as much as I can. So I was like, I'm going to do this. So I talked to CJ about job coach, and if you guys see CJ, you talk about a saw gunner. He'd make one hell of a saw gunner. He's guy's 6'2" something even, just solid. Holy crap. He played football in Wilmington for the Quakers years ago in college football, and he's a good guy, good coach, just good guy to be around. And we pushed each other around a little bit, and then just when it got down to it, I was like, hey, let's just get this done. I went through the whole state of Ohio to get to the certificate, to go for the first aid and CPR. I already knew a little bit of that through the military. Not a medic, but they train you a little bit of this and that, what to do. So already, off top of that, I didn't have to read any of that. I already knew right away off the hands-on from remembering the stuff from part of the brain that does heal. So I just remember certain areas of that. So I put myself through the training, the courses, and going through this modular for hours. It lasted for seemed like a month. Pretty much it was a month. Because, the average person you take online, you just read it, bam, bam, bam. Then you go through it, read it, bam, bam, bam. In between, he'd read to me about this, and then in between I would read it. We'd work on math and just,
Can I add to that about the VA used to give him speech therapy for several years, and then you want to talk about what they did?
Oh, I was not very fond of one of the VA men, and
No.
it was, I don't know if it's his fault, but the way he put it wanted me to crawl over and just punch him in the face really bad, break his nose, give him a PTSD. They said I met my quota. I'm reading kindergarten, preschool level. I'm 27 years old. They stopped my speech. They said I met my quota. I can't. I mean, they were like, hey, you met your quota. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, oh, you're able to read now. I'm like, read? I'm like, I can only read barely. I can barely read a Dr. Seuss book, and you're saying I'm cured. I'm done with my speech. It's like they said, you met your quota, and I was very upset. I couldn't speak up and say anything because anything that was going to come out of my mouth was military potty mouth. And as he was a civilian, I really couldn't say anything. He was like, you met your quota, you're done. And I'm like, are you?
So who helped you then?
The Wounded Warrior Project stepped up and got me a tutor. That's and she's very nice. I go to a library every other day, and we work one-on-one. And now I'm able to read pretty much some sentences, enough to get by. I'm able to write my first name, last name, social security number, the whole 9 yards, stuff that you need to get by, enough to get by for me to start. And the Wounded Warrior Project has done so much for me, a lot more than a lot of, I mean, the VA's done a lot for me. Don't get me wrong, the VA does a good job, but you know, they can only go so far. The Wounded Warrior Project stepped up and wanted to help me, and I was like, okay, you know, let's do it. So the independent program, the pilot program, got me through it to help with the reading, for me to coach, to get the goal that I wanted to do succeed, to help these kids, to show them not only as a retired soldier, as an amputation with a brain injury, you can still do things. I've done so much that it's not even funny. With the Wounded Warrior Project, just gave me another push to help me succeed even more. I rock climb, I ski, I play hockey, I skydive, I fish, I hunt, I hand cycle. I hand cycled 150 miles from San Antonio to Corpus Christi on a hand cycle. Took 2 days. I mean, there's anything, like, I got my mom to go skydiving. You should have seen her face. It was awesome. The Wounded Warrior Project has given me another opportunity to succeed in life. And I don't even know what to say about the organization. There's just so much good in it that it's unbelievable. I mean, they got me to, I'm a fisherman. I love to fish. I've been fishing since I was a kid. They took me to go to Kodak, Alaska. I've never been to Alaska. I haven't been to Alaska. Well, I've been to Alaska, but it was one of those hush-hush areas. Got to go king salmon and halibut fishing. I just know how to fish. I didn't know what I was dealing with until I pulled a 80-pound halibut out of the ocean, which just freaked me out. Flapping around, and they're like, well, what do I do with it? You just smack it in the head in the mallet. And I'm like, okay, stop it. And I'm like, no, I want to spear it. And they're like, no, we're going to give you the mallet. So I'm sitting there beating the crap out of him. And they said, you're good, it's done. Well, he's still moving. It was like, then you have to, bleed it out and, get the blood out and stuff. You throw it in the back, and there's somebody I'd be on the boat just fishing, just that cool wind hitting your face, some beautiful, you're seeing whales, dolphins, you're seeing bears, you're seeing everything that you see in TV shows and movies on National Geographic, and it's just the most beautiful thing I've ever seen and been through. It was amazing. I'm with Marines, the other Army, Air Force. I had a chick that had lost her hand, and she I don't know if it was Michigan State. She went to school at Michigan State. Then she was an MP, and she stepped on a landmine or picked one up. But I worked with all of them. I had one of my friends pulled in a 180-pound halibut, and it was awesome.
That's just great, Shane. Thank you. Tremendous. I'm going to ask one more question, then we're going to open it up to your Q&A. But I wanted to ask Brent. Brent, can you talk a little bit about what Wounded Warrior has done for you?
Sure. I think one of the biggest things right off the bat is when I was injured, I got back to the stateside, and I was awake, so I knew what was going on, and you just have so many appointments to go to and so many things to do, and really all you have is a hospital gown. That's about it. And it was just so nice to have a backpack there with clothes that I could wear and a backpack to hold this thick of medical records and appointments and all this stuff to go around. Otherwise, just holding it in a wheelchair. So that was one of the first things, and that really cemented in my mind that, you know, they're a good organization and they're to help. And afterwards, there's just so much alumni support through the website and events, and there's so many opportunities for Wounded Warriors to go out there and meet other Wounded Warriors and also educate the community of their mission to empower warriors.
Okay, that's great. Actually, I do have one more question. Steve, kind of what's the future plans for Wounded Warrior, and then we'll open it up to Q&A.
Well, over the next 5 years, really our goal is to continue to expand. We had hoped by now that with the conflicts winding down, that we'd be able to pull some resources out of the hospital. Unfortunately, the hospital beds are as full right now with newly wounded as they were in 2006 at the height of the conflict. So we're still very much embedded and will remain embedded and committed to being in the hospitals and at the bedside of the newly wounded, but more and more we're pushing into communities and trying to reach warriors that we might have missed in 05 and 06 and 07 when we were much smaller, who are now back home, trying to go back to school, trying to go back to work, and quite honestly struggling and needing support. And we're hopeful that the American public will continue to stick with us so that we can do that and accomplish that mission.
That's terrific. Now, these stories have been so compelling today that I kind of let the program go a little bit longer, so I'm going to have to cut back a little on our Q&A time. But now we're ready to gear up. If you have a question for one of our panelists, please raise your hand, and somebody will bring a microphone by.
Bill, I'm going to take a point of personal privilege just to say thank you so very much for being here. But we also have some recipients from the Robert J. Dole Public Service scholarships, and they came from K-State and from KU in order to honor you. Would you please stand?
Okay, do we have questions?
My wife was wondering about the finances of your organization, and I think kind of like a pie chart of where your funds go and what you have in the total resources.
Sure, we have, it's actually one of the first things we did was put a lot of our financials on our website, as well as a lot of our program impact. So I'll answer questions now, but also if anyone's interested, if you go on woundedwarriorproject.org, click on our financial section or our mission section, you can see a lot of data about the good work we're doing program by program in our financials. Right now, about 82% of all of the funds and donations and services that are donated to us go to our programs. And resource-wise, we've been growing at a relatively frenetic pace. We've been growing about 66% in revenue year over year, and about the same pace in programs. So each year we're able to grow. We've been fortunate enough to be able to put that right back into our programs. This year that we just ended, we're about 140 million in donations, and that's a testament to how much the American public really cares about this cause and the mission and taking care of the wounded.
Okay. Other questions today?
Stephen, you have an organization that is nationwide. I mean, our Wounded Warriors are from every state. Do you do this out of one location? Do you have chapters, your volunteers that go to help our Wounded Warriors? How is the volunteer organization set up?
That's great. It's actually predominantly, most of our work is getting done by staff, not by volunteers. You know, one of the things that we looked at when we decided to move forward with this model is that we said, who would we want at the bedside if it was my son who got injured, my brother who got injured? And it was always, well, we want people who are dedicated, who understand what they're doing, who are professionals, and are the best of the best of the best. So if you're getting benefits advice from one of our staff, then they've got 10 years plus experience. If you're suffering from a mental health issue and you need help with combat stress or cognitive rehabilitation, then we're getting people with doctorates in cognitive rehab therapy, and we're getting people with master's and doctoral degree in mental health who have a cultural competency in dealing with the military. So very much more a staff-based process than you would see in a volunteer capacity, and we've been able to do that by creating offices around the country. So we've now expanded to 16 offices in 15 states, and one overseas. So we've got an office now in Dole, Germany, that helps us coordinate and push us a little further downrange. So for those who don't know, Dole is the stopping over point. I know Brent and Shane each mentioned it. When warriors are coming back, it's kind of the choke point where warriors get stabilized before they come stateside. We have a contingent of 5 staff members there right now providing programming and support to the families and the warriors while they're getting stabilized, and some of them are getting transitioned out actually from Germany, and then they coordinate back stateside with our offices, and so they let our offices know when someone's coming back in their community and into their region, and they'll take care of them there.
Okay. Other questions? We have a question right here.
Well, I don't need a mic.
No, we do need a mic so we can get you on our audio, please.
I was just wondering how large your staff is, both stateside and overseas. How many employees do you have?
That's great. Right now we're at 300 employees. We've been growing at a relatively frenetic pace. To give you guys an idea of where that takes us from when we started, in our first year there were 6 of us, and it was all part-time, and it was very much a pass-the-hat organization. So you can imagine in 10 years and to grow to 300 staff, yeah, it has been a challenge. It's been great, though, because each year we're able to turn to warriors in areas that we weren't able to serve them the year before and say, it's great, we're able to expand and we're able to be there for you now.
We have some more questions here and over here. Right here first, Caitlin.
My question is, how many beneficiaries have you served in the past 10 years?
No, that's great. Right now we're actively serving 23,000 warriors. That's another area where we're actively trying to grow. Those are warriors who are participating in our programs day after day and throughout the course of the year. When we were much smaller, so in 2003, 4, and even 5, we didn't so much keep count as just triage everyone we could find. We really didn't start taking accurate count probably until mid-05, and since then we've got probably the largest active database of wounded from this conflict in the country, and we keep in contact with them over the long term. So one of the things you can find on our website that we've started doing is a longitudinal study. So besides just looking at how we're doing with each individual warrior, with each program we have, we work with RAND Corporation and Westat, another group, to do a long-term study, and we've got 3 years of data now on how well the wounded are doing in general. And they've told us, RAND, they do a lot of studies for the federal government. We have a better database of the wounded, and we track better what we're doing with the wounded than you would see if you went to some government databases.
Okay.
And our goal over the next 5 years is 100,000. We really want to impact a generation of warriors, and we don't think that we're doing that unless we can get to 100,000.
I would direct this to Steve. I know a lot of celebrities work with wounded warriors. I have been most impressed with the quiet way in which Gary Sinise works. Does he work with your organization?
Yes, Gary Sinise has worked with us in the past. He actually ran a concert for us at one point with a band he has. I don't know if you guys are familiar with the Lieutenant Dan Band. It's a group based on his character from Forrest Gump, but he's been a great supporter of our organization and many others that help veterans.
Okay, do we have any other questions? I have time for one last question, if there is one, right here.
Both for maybe Cindy and Steve. I'm curious of the programs. You mentioned the legislation that recently came. What gaps do you see as a caregiver? And then Steve, from your perspective, what gaps from maybe a direction that you're looking to try to fill that currently maybe aren't being met?
You can go first.
Gaps that, as you heard from Shane with the speech therapy, what they're finding out with, especially with traumatic brain injuries, that for some reason they go by a rating and then they follow through with those therapies. After Shane had been in therapy for several years, they kind of dropped the bomb with the speech. And that's where Wounded Warrior Project comes in. They look for those gaps, they find out where those needs are, and that's what's so important, because it's not a cookie cutter fit. Each individual traumatic brain injury is not the same. So we need to find where those gaps are and fill that in. For example, prime example was the speech therapy. How can you say a 26-year or 27-year-old can be at his potential at first grade level. I mean, that's just unfathomable. But other than that, as well as a caregiver, I gave up my nursing career because Shane requires 24-hour safety care. Can he be alone? Yes, he can be alone. It's just there's other issues with the cognitive deficits. I can imagine the faces he's making. In terms of giving up my position as a nurse, I've lost income and health insurance. Now with this caregiver bill, I'm getting the much needed health care. But most importantly, they gave me an opportunity to work for them. I'm in a position called Warrior Speak, where we go out into the public and we promote education and awareness. And I can't tell you the difference that has for me as a person to grow. Because quite frankly, to go back into nursing, especially into ER, at this point it was very difficult because I know I'm suffering from secondary PTSD. How can I care for a patient after what I've been through and what the trauma that I've been through for my son? Now I have the opportunity to go out in the public, make a difference, be an advocate for wounded warriors, because we live it every single day. So that, to me, is the most important gap, perspective of a caregiver.
I would say that the two biggest areas we're looking right now are obviously the area of cognitive rehabilitation and long-term care, and then mental health. In situations like we talked about with our independence program, you have a lot of warriors who are getting to a point where they're told they've plateaued. So in other words, you've gone as far as we believe you can in your initial rehabilitation, and I hope you can maintain yourself there, but we're really not going to get you to a point of success in your life, and that's not an acceptable answer. Add on to that the fact that while Cindy is very healthy and is doing great and is terrific, we have a lot of families who might be older, who might be ailing, and now you add the strain of caregiving, and a lot of them are questioning what happens to my son or daughter, to this warrior, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years, when I can no longer do this. And we're really looking at ways both we can programmatically and through a policy perspective make sure that we don't have warriors end up at 20 or 30 or 40 years old in a geriatric nursing home, because that's a solution right now that's available to them, and that's not a tenable solution or an okay solution. And on mental health, it's stemming the tide. To give you an estimate of how bad it is, we said a couple 100,000 with combat stress. There's over 200,000 already seeking from these conflicts care with the VA for combat stress. While they are increasing the number of mental health care professionals they have, there's still a huge backlog. That can mean 4 months, 5 months, 6 months or more wait to get in and see a therapist when you have the courage to admit that you're suffering with PTSD or you have a mental health issue, and by that time you've probably lost that warrior. And what that means is you're increasing the chances of substance abuse, of homelessness, or the most dire circumstances of suicide, and that's something that our staff deals with on a regular basis. We're not a crisis line, but we get more than our share of crisis calls, and finding placements for those warriors is an area where we're looking to expand our programs. When you talk about, and you've probably all seen the numbers of suicides, in the first half of this year we had one active duty service member take their own life per day. And that is unacceptable. When you get into the veteran population at large, not just this generation, that means one veteran takes their life every 80 minutes. That means in the time we've been sitting here, a veteran of the United States who raised their hand or was drafted and served their country killed themselves. And that's something that we need to stop and we need to fix, and it's certainly an area where we're expanding our programming.
You guys are doing a fabulous job. I don't know if everyone knows this or not, but this is the first organization, foundation, that has been awarded the Dole Leadership Prize. And so I want to thank all of you for being here today. It's been our honor to host you, but I also wanted to officially present the Dole Leadership Prize for 2012 to Wounded Warrior Project.
Thank you.